Hello, I'm Dr. Debbie, and this week we're continuing with part 2 of our series, Wired to Love and Be Loved, on the psychology of relationships. In part 1, we talked about attachment, how human beings bond, why emotional connection matters so deeply, and how early experiences quietly shape the way we love as adults. Today we're building on that foundation. Today we're talking about gender differences in social and emotional development, where those differences come from, why they matter, and how misunderstanding your differences often causes unnecessary pain and confusion in marriage. Before we go further, I need to begin by filling in an important missing piece, something I did not explain clearly enough in earlier episodes, and without it, men are often misunderstood. Here it is. From the beginning of time, men have recognized two core truths about boys. First, boys are physically stronger than girls. Second, boys are also more emotionally intense than girls. Not emotionally fragile, emotionally powerful. Their feelings don't just stay inside. Their emotions tend to drive action. And because emotional intensity combined with physical strength can become dangerous to themselves or to others, boys have historically been taught something very specific. They're taught to control their emotions. They're taught to process internally, and they're taught to take action only when it serves the group. That's not repression. That's discipline. Boys are also taught this. If you are attacked, defend yourself, but only as much as necessary. First, you walk away. Then you ignore. Then, only if required, you use force. Now, here's where this gets complicated. When the person attacking a boy or a man is the same person he has been wired to protect, especially when that person is a woman, his internal rulebook no longer works, and he often feels overwhelmed, confused, and trapped. Keep that in mind, because everything else we're going to talk about today builds on that foundation. Several years ago, I sent out a relationship survey. One woman wrote this: "We have problems agreeing on how to deal with problems. I want to talk about them when they come up. He wants to think about it on his own and hope it goes away." She's actually very perceptive. Men do tend to think about things privately. And yes, they often hope the problem resolves without conversation or intervention. That doesn't mean they don't care. It means they were taught very early on to process alone first and take action later. Many women experience this as emotional distance. So let me ask you, what frustrates you most about the man you love? He doesn't engage in casual conversation. He doesn't respond when you try to connect. He doesn't talk about his feelings or seem to value yours. He stonewalls. He feels closed off. He seems irritated by everything. Or maybe he's always working, always on his phone. These aren't random personality defects. They are developmental outcomes. So let's talk about why. As we discussed in part 1, every human being is born with an attachment system. As children, we need someone who is consistently available and responsive, not just to our physical needs, but to our emotional ones as well. When that happens often enough, we develop security. When it doesn't, we adapt. We become anxious, we become avoidant, or we learn to disconnect. Those early experiences set the baseline for how we experience intimacy later in life. This is true for women, and it's equally true for men. One of the most important principles to understand is this: different inputs produce different outcomes. Men and women are biologically different. That's nature. And we are socialized differently. That's nurture. Both matter. Biologically, a man tends to be larger and stronger. He has greater upper body strength. He tends to be single-focused, what I often call hunter focus. Emotion drives action for him. A woman, on the other hand, is built for endurance. She tends to be more multi-focused. She processes verbally. Words matter to her. She's sensitive. He is highly sensitive, but to different stimuli and with different expressions. Now let's talk about development. Little girls are generally encouraged to express emotion. They are taught, implicitly and explicitly, that asking for help is okay and that someone will respond. On the other hand, little boys experience something very different. Research shows boys are actually more emotionally sensitive than girls, especially to changes in their environment and to their mothers. They cry more, they're harder to soothe, but caregivers often respond by waiting. Let's take a simple playground example. A toddler girl has her toy taken away by another child. She cries and looks to her caregiver. The caregiver responds immediately, comforting her and intervening. She learns, my emotions matter. Help will come. Now, compare that to a toddler boy. His toy is taken. He's upset too, just as upset as the little girl. But the caregiver often waits to see what he will do. If he cries, he may be told to stop crying. If he asks for help, he may be asked to explain himself. What happened? What are you going to do about it? Comfort is delayed. Responsiveness is conditional. Over time, he learns powerful lessons. Don't cry. Don't ask for help. Handle it yourself. Researchers call this normative developmental trauma, not because his parents intended harm, but because this scenario repeatedly plays out. It becomes the norm for him. This also leads to something called male relational dread. When emotionally confronted as an adult, especially by a woman, his nervous system often interprets this mental confusion as danger. He retreats, not because he doesn't care, but because his own vulnerability feels unfamiliar and unsafe. When you put all of this together, you begin to see predictable adult patterns. Some people, usually women, become anxious and focused, keenly aware of the temperature of the relationship and desperate to restore closeness. Others, often men, become avoidant, pulling back, shutting down, and distancing under stress. Some feel both anxious and avoidant. Others disconnect almost entirely. And it varies between both genders. Although it does tend to lean in one direction or the other, it still varies between both genders. You're not locked in because of your sex. However, in most romantic relationships, she becomes the pursuer and he becomes the withdrawer. Not always, but very often. This is not because she's irrational or because he's emotionally broken. Those are lies. They are each responding exactly as they were wired and trained to respond. Emotional disconnection is the number one problem in marriage, and the good news is it's not permanent, but it does require understanding. Your differences are not liabilities. They're actually assets when you learn how to work with them instead of against them. Wisdom gives you choices. You're not stuck. You're not powerless. You are learning how the system works. And once you understand the system, you can respond differently. If you don't know your romantic attachment style, that's a powerful place to begin. I have a free assessment on my website, and I'll link it for you below. Because marriage doesn't have to be something that simply is what it is, with no hope of changing it. In fact, marriage is a byproduct of two people interacting with one another. Change the interactions, and the marriage changes with them. Thanks for being here today. We'll talk again soon. Until then, take care.